Hello, my name is Dr. Noreen Wark. The title of this presentation is Shifting Paradigms, a Critical Pragmatic Evaluation of Key Factors Affecting Learner-Empowered Emergent Technology Integration. This presentation is based upon my doctoral dissertation. This presentation provides a brief overview of the introduction, literature review, and research design, and a slightly more detailed discussion on the findings and conclusions before offering final comments on this project. I'll begin by introducing the project. There are two terms used frequently in this study. Technology is derived from two Greek words, techne and logos. There are countless definitions for the word. Most are associated with the Greek root techne. For the purpose of this project, though, technology is defined as tools, means, skills, crafts, or systems that are outward reflections of individual and societal values and motivations. The study also subscribes to Valienzo's definition of the term emergent technology, which is tools, concepts, innovations, and advancements utilized in diverse educational settings to serve varied education-related purposes. As humans advance technology, technology alters humanity. Epochs in human history are marked by technological advances that change the socioeconomic structures of societies. There's exponential growth in the emergence of new technologies, and Kurzweil predicts that by 2045 we will be spiritual machines. The question is, what kind of mindset are learners going to need in order to thoughtfully and purposely integrate emergent technologies on an ongoing basis, given this fluxing world of dynamically evolving technologies and educative practices? The purpose of the study was to critically reflect online graduate-level learners' perspectives on what key factors and ultimately what learning paradigm most empowers learners to integrate emergent technologies for learning on demand. Thus, the study sought to answer what educational paradigm most empowers online graduate-level learners to acquire higher levels of emergent technology integration for learning on demand. Sub-questions led to the exploration of key institutional, curricular, instructional, and contextual factors that empower learners to integrate emergent technologies on demand, and how these factors related to any differences in technology integration levels, as well as the amount of scaffolding and learning curve respondents reported, based upon what learning paradigm these respondents appeared to prefer during the study. This study is presented from a critical pragmatic perspective. The term critical pragmatism was coined in 1988 by Deegan to describe the worldview of Jane Addams. It is a blend of critical theory, pragmatism, and reflective research traditions, and the goal of critical pragmatic educational research is to empower learners and increase equality in education. Next is a brief review of relevant literature. The literature identifies two disparate epistemic stances on learning. Behaviorism subscribes to the notion that the source of knowledge is external and sense-based, whereas the perceptual epistemology argues that the source of knowledge is innate human perception. These opposing epistemic stances are manifested to varying degrees in the learning theories and approaches that have evolved from these notions, as illustrated here. In practice, though, the most prevalent difference is who has control over learning. After examining the theory of learning, I explored the topic of natural learning. According to the literature on natural learning, preschool children are instinctively curious, eager, dynamic, active learners. Their interests intrinsically motivate their desire to learn. Learning naturally occurs in any setting, is often social, and continues throughout life. And humans are intrinsically driven by the desire to achieve autonomy, mastery, purpose, and innovation, as well as the need to create a better humanity. Recent discoveries in neurology indicate that innate individual perceptions are the source of knowledge. Genetics, psychophysiological state, and experiences alter perceptions. Perceptual learning marries simple or instrumental reasoning with transformational learning. Transformative learning is a dynamic blend of rational thought, involving logic and effective thinking, and creative intuition, leading to change in perception. Given that neurological findings support the epistemic view that the source of human knowledge is individual innate perception, it seems incomprehensible that traditional behavioral practices still prevail. This thought led to an exploration on issues of power and control over learning. The educational system in a behavioral paradigm is a top-down hierarchical dictatorship. The curriculum is abstract, fractured, lineal, one-size-fits-all, and determined by those in power. The institution and teacher control instructional time, pace, place, content, resources, delivery, and evaluation. Learning officially occurs in the formal school context, typically during the learner's younger years. In the perceptual learning system, the institution is a network democracy emulating principles of autonomy, diversity, openness, interactivity, and responsibility. The curriculum is holistic, individualistic, and based upon a learner-determined individual educational plan. The learner controls their learning throughout life within their unique personal learning environments with the support of their personal learning networks. With the central tenet of education for all and the ability of emergent technologies to exponentially erode the parameters of space and time, distance education offers learners with the opportunity to realize control over their own learning. Nevertheless, recent research indicates that the emancipating role of distance education is now being threatened by some educators' desire to replicate face-to-face educational settings. Which brings us back to the central dilemma addressed by this study. What educational paradigm best supports learners' capacity for omni-learning during this global shift in information flow and the nebulous future beyond? This leads us to the research design used for the project. This exploratory study employed a transformative mixed methods methodology. There were 7 data collection sources. 12 volunteer students from 2 online Masters of Education and Distance Education courses during the spring 2017 term completed pre- and post-term questionnaires and mid- and post-term interviews. Each course instructor completed 1 interview. The 6th source was the University Public Course web pages, and my research journal was the final source. And Vivo Pro 11 and SPSS version 23 software programs were used to analyze the data. A second coder was also employed. A quarter of the student interviews were co-coded. 17% were initially coded in isolation, yielding inter-coder reliability of 92.4% agreement and a kappa coefficient of 0.956, and intra-coder reliability of 93.6% and 0.985 kappa. The findings related to the 3 sub-questions in this project are presented in this section before the overarching question is addressed. The first question asked what key factors empower the respondents and other learners to integrate emergent technologies for learning on demand, and if these perceptions would change as the term unfolded. The top 10 encouraging factors lists represent 27% of all empowerment units and over a third of all the encouraging units identified by learners in this study. Over half of these top 10 empowering units were divided between the instructional use of emergent technologies, being responsible for one's own learning, and the instructional use of assignments. 3 dominant cross-factor themes were also identified. These were the instructional use of technology, relevancy, and accessibility. The top 10 lack of empowering factors list contained 8% of all empowerment units and 42% of all disempowering units in the study. Over half of the top 10 disempowering factors were split between the instructional use of technology, the formal school environment, and the MEd-DE program. Although 2/3 of encouraging midterm factors were also on the post-term list, the number of units and the order of priority of these factors changed. The number of encouraging factors also increased by post-term. The second question asked if there was a difference in technology integration levels between the learners who consistently identified a preference for one learning paradigm or who appeared to be in the midst of a paradigm shift. If so, what key learner-identified factors were most likely associated with the differences? Behavioural, perceptual, and shifting paradigm groups indicated that they were at their early practice level with technology integration at the beginning of the term. By the end of the term, the behavioural paradigm respondents level had slightly decreased. The shifting paradigms group practice level had slightly to moderately increased, and the perceptual paradigm groups level had significantly increased to early competency. In examining what key factors were most likely associated with the changes in technology integration levels, it was discovered that the top 5 factors identified by the behavioural paradigm group had nothing in common with the other groups. 4 of the 5 factors in the behavioural group list were disempowering. The disempowerment of government changes and instructional use of technologies topped this list. All of the factors on the perceptual and shifting paradigms top 5 lists were empowering. 3 factors were the same on both lists. These were the instructional use of technologies and assignments and being responsible for their own learning. One difference between these latter 2 groups lists was the number of units assigned to each factor. 4 of the perceptual paradigm factors shared a nearly equal number of units, while there was a significant spread in the number of units between the shifting paradigm factors. The other noticeable difference was the inclusion of 2 meso-level factors on the shifting paradigms list. These differences suggest that the shifting paradigms group may have been struggling with taking control over their own learning. The third question asked if there was a difference in the amount of scaffolding and learning curve reported by the learners who identified a consistent preference for one paradigm or who appeared to be in the midst of a paradigm shift. And the second half of this question was already addressed in response to question 2. Those belonging to the behavioral perceptual paradigms groups strongly disagreed that they required more scaffolding than their classmates, while responses from the shifting paradigms group varied between strongly disagreeing and agreeing with this statement. Behavioral paradigm group members strongly disagreed, perceptual paradigm group members disagreed, and shifting paradigm group members wavered between disagreeing and agreeing with experiencing a significant learning curve during the term. The final overarching question was, what educational paradigm most empowers online graduate level learners to acquire higher levels of emergent technology integration for learning on demand? The paradigm that most empowered learners in this study to acquire higher levels of emergent technology integration was the perceptual paradigm, as evidenced by the significant increase in the emergent technology integration level by the end of the term among those identifying with this paradigm. These self-determined learners set and achieve personal technology integration goals by employing key empowering factors in their personal learning environments, thus acquiring an early competency level by the end of the term. Conversely, those identifying with the behavioral paradigm felt so disempowered that they couldn't imagine setting any personal learning goals without the direction of meso and macro level authorities. Those in the shifting paradigms group who did not set goals acquired a slight increase in skill level, while those in this group who set and changed their goals during the term acquired a moderate increase in their level of practice. Lastly, I would like to highlight some conclusions. I concluded that the most empowering paradigm is the perceptual paradigm. Most respondents appeared to be in the midst of a paradigm shift during the study. Learning is a dynamic individual process, and the paradigm shift framework graphics must reflect the dynamic nature of learning. This new version of the paradigm shift model uses a Venn diagram to express the nonlinear nature of learning. And the adapted Omni-tech image at the top of the new framework is also intended to express the nonlinear nature of learning, although I'm contemplating other graphic ways to express this notion. The paradigm shift framework captures the theory, nature, and power of learning, illustrates the dynamic nature of learning, identifies the relationship between learning paradigms, learning approaches, and the integration of emergent technologies at the individual learner, small group, and large group levels, offers a framework for identifying and enhancing learner-determined integration of emergent technologies in current and desired personal learning environments, provides a learner-determined emergent technology integration taxonomy, merging innate drives, rational and creative thought, as well as experiences and perceptions of the natural learner, and it may be adaptable to other areas of learning as well. Some limitations and delimitations of the study include government, institution, and faculty limits that prevented interventions designed to challenge learners' perceptions on learner empowerment and emergent technology integration. The sample size made it difficult to identify outliers or generalize the findings beyond similar groups of learners, although critical pragmatists argue that there are no universal truths. Therefore, I recognize that the framework, findings, and recommendations coming from the study will evolve as new learners and perspectives on learning emerge. Another double-edged sword is the reliance upon respondent perceptions. While the study found that some respondents' perceptions did not match other perceptions, this only underscores the need to acknowledge the dynamic, individualistic nature of learning. Furthermore, according to scholars such as Frere, only those who perceive themselves to be enslaved can emancipate themselves. Thus, it was critical to examine the learners' perspectives on empowerment in this study in order to understand their realities. Finally, there were a few instrument shortcomings. For example, the emergence of technology definition issue needs to be addressed. There currently are a limited number of operationalizing statements for the concepts of purpose, innovation, and reflective thought. And as well, the emergent technology integration mastery level list is limited and time-stamped, so needs to be reviewed before being used in the future. There are two main areas of recommendations coming from the study. The first concerns learner-empowered technology integration. Such recommendations include access to emergent technologies, augment or replace old with current resources and technologies, initiate perpetual stakeholder currency and professional development, make learning relevant. Theory, research, and practice should be blended in all courses, and stakeholders should assist learners in setting, reflecting on, and revising personal goals. In terms of future research, I suggest minor changes to some research instruments, recruit a statistically significant number of respondents for another round of study, introduce interventions to challenge perceptions on learner-empowered emergent technology integration, and then measure long-term transformative effects, design and research a course based upon literature and findings from the study, and test the viability of the framework for other areas of learning. This dissertation merges a critical pragmatic paradigm and transformative mixed methodology to amplify the learner's perspective. It documents the relationship between paradigms, learner empowerment, and emergent technology integration, offers a paradigm shift framework and recommendations for improving learner empowerment and emergent technology integration, provides evidence that learning is an individual dynamic process, challenges stakeholder beliefs about learner empowerment and emergent technology, and promotes the widespread adoption of a perceptual paradigm that can revolutionize learning, society, and our world. Time is of the essence. There is growing evidence that social elite are using emergent technologies to capture and control information flow by employing traditional educational systems and practices in online and mobile learning environments, and increasing subversive government data mining, surveillance, and laws that erode citizens' rights and freedoms in new ways. This study shows that distance education and emerging technologies can serve to empower learners, but learners must actively seek emancipation. Such empowerment necessitates the dynamic interplay between instrumental reasoning, rational thinking, and creative intuition. The ability to recognize how emergent technologies shape and can shape reality, and the tenacity to engage in appropriate emancipatory action. The study also provides evidence for why learner empowerment is desirable and offers suggestions for how stakeholders can enhance the development of self-determined learners, such as helping learners to articulate, assess, and adjust their personal learning goals through reflective practices. Lastly, I sincerely hope that by amplifying the voices of the learners in this study, all stakeholders, especially learners, realize the critical role that learner emancipation will play in the evolution of our world. Thank you.